Oompa-doopity-doo. I have a perfect puzzle for you. Oompa-loompa-doopity-dee. If you are wise, you'll listen to me. Sorry, I don't know why, but that song has been stuck in my head for weeks, and I have to share it with you. That one, as well as there was an old lady who swallowed a fly. I don't know why she swallowed the fly. Perhaps she'll die. That one was a classic growing up. Hopefully I'm not the crazy person and another person knows that song as well. But I'm rambling. Obviously, I'm kind of sick right now. I apologize. I just got my allergies under control, and then yesterday I was hit with a gnarly head cold. So for any excessive noises or annoying gross sniffles, I'll just have my editor take those out later. And my editor is just me in the future, but a little bit more of a bitch. Today, we head across the pond. And by that, I mean we are diving into a 100-year-old Irish story about the murder of an entire family and a subsequent trial that may or may not have sentenced the wrong man to death. Was he truly the monster who went on a killing spree, or was he simply the easiest answer at the time? A scapegoat, if you will. Charles Howey, an Irish politician, he's not part of this story at all. He's just best known for his phone tapping scandal. He's quoted saying, "Ireland is where strange tales begin and happy endings are possible," end quote. However, today, happy may not be the right word to describe this ending. So, before DNA, before fingerprints, even before the landline telephone, Ireland was a much different place. The year is 1926, and Ireland is still struggling from their own civil war, ending only about 4 years previously. Economic recession and depression brought unemployment rates up to record highs, not to mention the food shortages that Ireland always seems to be dealing with. Potato famine. Maybe the people of Ireland already had enough going on, which gives reason as to why the story today tends to be overlooked. But it's kind of funny. Back when it did occur in 1926, the story faded in, created this huge media storm, and then suddenly faded away, and nobody talked about it. This quote from a 2022 news article shocked me regarding the almost secret nature of the murders that I'm about to talk about. Quote, "When it happened, the story became a sensation. Lurid headlines, wild speculation, and in-depth expert feature pieces filled many pages in the spring and summer of 1926. Then, the story just faded away. There was little known or spoken about it, so much so that even the members of the family never knew it had happened. One of those grandchildren, Mary Frances, features in the documentary that they're talking about separately. She grew up in Wales, and despite having spent many summers in Malahide, Ireland, she only found out what had happened a few years ago," end quote. That's crazy. She, a grandchild of the victims of these crimes, didn't find out till almost 100 years after it actually happened. That's how, like, hush hush it's been. But enough secrecy. What is Malahide? How and why did an entire family fall victim to the same crime? But most importantly, who could do this and why? The McDonnell family, composed of Annie, 56, Joseph, 55, Peter, 51, and Alice, 47, four in total, had decided to move in together. Having retired from a very prosperous family grocery business, the siblings decided to pool their money and splurge on quite a nice house. Specifically how much? It saddens me to tell you that I don't know. But the house that the four purchased was named La Mancha, hence La Mancha Murders, located in an area known as Malahide, just outside Dublin, on the seaside. La Mancha's construction began in the 1700s under direction of the, quote, Henley family, and that's pretty much all we know about them. It was originally Georgian in nature and described in 1836 as a very neat 3-story slated modern house in good repair, end quote. Not to mention it sat on 30 acres of prime land next to the coast. La Mancha housed at least 3 entire families prior to the McDonnell's purchase in 1897. A family originally from Balagar, I believe, Ireland, which is actually the exact opposite side of the country, basically, on the other coast. So they moved across the country, retired, and bought this, not quite a mansion, but beautiful house on gorgeous land. And I'm just realizing now as I say this, but these people retired early. If the murders that I'm about to tell you about in 1926, if those happened in 26 when their average age was around like 52-ish, and they bought the house 28-ish years ago, they would have been like in their 20s when they retired. Like, fuck me, way to go. Okay, where was I? So many years passed, as I just basically said, between the time of them buying the house and the incident. And the family turned this house into a home, as I love to say. The years went on, and the McDonald's hired a housemaid named Mary McGowan and a handyman, or they called him a yardman, for outside work named James Clark. I'm not 100% sure, but it seems that these two were full-time employees of the family and basically residents because they both had rooms themselves inside the house. The only other addition over the years was a gardener by the name of Henry McCabe. He, however, did not have a room. Unclear if he was full-time or not. I'm thinking no, but whatever the instance, the family and their employees lived peacefully for years until one shocking day in March of 1926. Just after 8 a.m., Henry McCabe headed towards La Mancha to start working. As he came closer, McCabe saw an unnaturally large black smoke billow coming from the family's house. And according to the Irish Times and McCabe's own testimony, quote, it soon seemed to him that the smoke issuing from the top of the house was excessive, and he made to go in at the back door. He saw flames and other signs that the things were not as they should be, and he set off at once for Malahide to call the fire brigade. And on his way, told men whom he met that the house was on fire, end quote. So among these locals that he had met on his way to tell the fire brigade was a Garda sergeant, or a police sergeant, if you will. And this man, being trained as he was, rushed towards the burning building, smashed a window leading to a basement room. This room actually belonged to that of James Clark, the family's yardman, who lay motionless and half-dressed on his bed. So as the sergeant and other locals helped drag him out, it soon discovered that he is dead. And this is where the wild takes a story turn. This is where the story takes a wild turn, from an arson story to a gruesome familicide. As the fire brigade rushed in just before 9 a.m. to put the flames out, the Garda sergeant had a moment to look over Clark's unmoving body. It was reported he had what, quote, looked like defensive wounds on his forearms and one deep wound across the left front of his skull. And from later indications, it would seem that his head had been opened by the blow of a poker or some such instrument, end quote. Right away, it was noticeable that he had been dead for some time, not as the fire was just getting started. So, as more and more emergency personnel and town locals show up, the scene is very tense. Not only is one man found presumably murdered before the fire, but now everyone's holding their breath to see what remains of the rest of the family. Are they inside? Were they gone? Is anybody alive? After what probably felt like days, the fire finally simmered to a slow burn and the investigation could begin. Although the house itself lay almost entirely destroyed, what was inside was much more important. The remains of 5 more bodies were pulled from the wreckage that day, including all 4 siblings and the maid, Mary McGowan. Other than the intense charring, each body bore just gnarly marks and sparked odd questions. For example, Peter McDonnell, the youngest brother, is found, quote, entirely unclothed except for a woolen singlet and a pair of pants lying loosely over it. He seemed to be the last in the house to die, yet the garments had the appearance of having been placed over his body by the hands of another, end quote. The other brother was found completely stripped, while all 3 women remained clothed. Very backwards to what we normally see in situations like these. However, all 3 women did have similar blows to the head, resulting in cracked skulls. So as the investigation continues, the fire brigade, that word sometimes comes out so weird. The fire brigade quickly determined that this was an act of arson, most likely as an attempt to cover up the horrific acts of violence that had just occurred inside. And according to the fire report, quote, all over the house, it is plain to see that the fires were started in many separate places, apparently by the spreading and lighting of some inflammable spirit, end quote. So this to me is it's interesting. Whoever started the fire intended for it to go up right away and hopefully burn through the night, destroying any and all evidence. But instead, he maybe tried to set beer on fire, and it just gets going in the early morning in time for the locals to report the fire and save the bodies from total destruction. And as you would expect, with all this happening, rumors spread like crazy. The papers took hold of the story, making it front page for days, like I initially said, before it faded into oblivion. Friends and colleagues of the family quickly dispelled any notion that the family was fighting amongst themselves or had enemies on the outside. And even the police struggled to find any real leads or connect any dots in the days that followed. After about a week of dead ends, quote, Emmy reports discovered trace amounts of arsenic in some of the bodies, not lethal doses, but enough to make them weak. Each victim had died before the fire was set by about 5 p.m. on the Monday before, end quote. So, as we all expected, and it's finalized, my goodness, they were killed prior to the fire being started. That was not their cause of death. And this would prove the theory that the killer or killers failed in starting the fire the night before, therefore failing to thoroughly burn their victims. So soon, as no other leads turn up, suspicion quickly points towards the gardener, Henry McCabe. I mean, initially, he stood out to me for one reason. He was the only employee / family member that wasn't in the house or a victim of an attack. But to the police, he stood out immediately for another reason. The morning of the fire, he was seen by multiple witnesses wearing the trousers of the eldest brother. And then to find the male bodies stripped that same morning, it was quite odd. Second, he did have access to arsenic. McCabe, as a gardener, he was able to use chemicals for killing weeds, and there were trace amounts of arsenic found in these chemicals. So that was strike number 2. And finally, when they searched the McCabe residence, multiple pieces of clothing were found with blood on them. Now, this was enough for investigators, and on April 2nd, they arrived at Henry's residence and arrested him, where he lived with his wife and 9 children. 9 goddamn kids. Puke. 10 days later, on April 12th, police officially charged McCabe with the murders, and so a trial ensued. However, this case seemed quite circumstantial, but no evidence points to anyone else, and I think the police felt pressured by the media at the time to get justice and get it quick. So many witnesses came forward to testify on both sides, actually. A neighbor of the family may have been the most important. However, he had run into Henry the morning after the fire occurred. And out of the blue, Henry asked this neighbor to lie for him. He essentially goes, "If anyone asks where I got these trousers, can you say they were sent in the mail?" Like, why, dude? I would First of all, I would never bring up someone's trousers in a conversation anyways. So why would you do it here? And you're simply just bringing attention to yourself. I don't think anybody's going to notice if you're wearing your trousers or another guy's trousers. Just stop making me talk about trousers. Anyways, as the prosecution went on and produced the bloodstains and the arsenic that we just went over, the defense, they argued that every gardener would have the same access to weed killer and the blood could be his own from any number of outdoor injuries. I mean, did they have other gardeners in the past? Is there another gardener down the street? And when asked to provide a motive for his crimes, the prosecution only had this, an insanely weak motive, if not the weakest I've ever heard. They claim that since the house La Mancha recently went up on the market, Henry McCabe feared for his job at the house. That was his motive, that he feared he would lose his job at the house because the house was up for sale. Now, that is a stretch. No matter how circumstantial or lacking in motive, the prosecution was, in less than an hour, successful. The jury came back with a guilty verdict. It was clear that the house fire was intended to cover up a horrific slaughter inside. But do we really know if Henry did it? Yes, he seems like the plausible choice. He was the first on the scene to report it. He was the only one not in the house that worked or lived there. But I mean, do we have any legitimate proof that he did it? It didn't matter. Henry McCabe would now hang for these crimes. Later that year, he was executed and the public moved on. For years, it wasn't talked about until 1933, just a couple of miles down the road from I'm so sorry, guys. From where La Mancha once stood, a young man named Denning came across something peculiar. I'm just going to read you this passage from Murderpedia as it does a better job than I do. Plus, I'm fried. Whatever. Quote, "A youth called Denning was hard at work in the garden of a house at Church Road. The home had recently been purchased and the gardens were overgrown. Denning was brought in to do the cleanup when his attention was drawn to an object at his feet. Buried just beneath the surface, he spotted a silver watch. On the back of it, he read the inscription, quote, James Clark. And suddenly he spotted a second silver watch with, quote, J. MacD on it. It was beside a heavy gold Albert chain to which was attached a sovereign case. He quickly picked them up and ran to his father. He went immediately to the local Garda station and a full-scale search was ordered. It was impossible to link the items to the La Mancha murders, but the coincidence was surely too incredible not to be." End quote. What? So, does this prove his guilt? Or does it offer up even more questions? Was there a different gardener? Or did Henry kill these people, steal their stuff, and then go to another person's house and hide their jewelry in another garden? None of it just makes sense to me, but I'm glad that it happened. Or maybe the McDonalds did have enemies and they lived in the same community. Who knows who was living there on Church Street in 1926. It's just an absolute cluster. You can believe what you want. But when asked if he had any final words, McCabe spoke in regards to the members of the jury, and he said this: "All I have to say is God forgive them. I am the victim of bribery and perjury." End quote. I'm not sure where he pulled bribery and or perjury from. If he were innocent, he could just say, God forgive them. But adding the bribery and perjury part, what do you think? I'm not sure the prosecution had enough to actually convict the guy, at least in today's terms of the law, but I also don't see who else could have done this. And now I'm just kind of word vomiting, but Plus, why would McCabe all of a sudden just snap? Did he have like a previous criminal record? I know killers are tricky. They're like tricksters of the highest magnitude, but after so many years and after 9 fucking kids, well, I don't know, maybe that's why he did it. Just couldn't take the crying anymore. I don't know. The world may never know. Thank you guys for putting up with me. That's all I have today. I'm sorry my voice is a little wonky. Or, as I should say, as I learned from an Aussie, a little crumpy wumpy. That's all. Love you. Happy National Something Day. Bye-bye. Also, before I want to go, I know this isn't the most popular podcast out there. It's kind of just for me at this point, but for those who have supported and listened and followed, and I hope you guys have a specifically good day. Goodbye.